What are you actually selling in your clinic? I'd never thought of it this way before. Man, let me tell you, 23 and a half hours on a plane across 3 consecutive flights totally sucks. Feels good to be home though. The problem with flying into Sydney from the USA is that your flight lands at 7:30 in the morning, which is absolutely the wrong time to go to bed, even when that's all you feel like doing. So I hit the sauna and jumped straight into making this video for you. So please forgive me if I'm a little less eloquent than usual this week. I think that long sitting on a plane basically turns everyone's brain to mush. It's always worth it though. Puerto Rico was beautiful and the UAC meeting was excellent as usual. Here's the first insight that I have to share from that experience. You're playing too small. You're thinking too small and you're playing too small. That's how I feel after every single UAC meeting. Even when I go in thinking I'm not, I always come out knowing that I am. And I suspect the same might be true for you too. I don't mean that as a judgment, just simply an idea for your brain to chew on when you've got a quiet moment. Where might that be true for you? And what would you love to do about it if you really gave yourself permission? Anyway, with that being said, I mentioned in last week's episode how I ran into Dr. Stephen Franson by the pool when I was writing last week's newsletter. We ended up having quite a deep conversation, and I'd like to share some ideas with you from that conversation, as well as a new paradigm that I think you'll find useful. There's a couple of practice gems in here too. One of the things that we discussed in depth was how to scale chiropractic itself to a worldwide level and what the blocks to massive growth are. Something Steve said that really struck me was that he felt one of the key limitations is a lack of understanding of what our actual offering is in the marketplace. He said that most chiropractors believe that our product is the adjustment. And I guess up until that moment, I was one of those chiropractors. I'd never really thought about it on this level before. However, our real product isn't the adjustment. There are other professions that are manipulating the spine, for example, manipulative physiotherapists, but they aren't creating the same life and health transformations that we are. Now, I know most of us would argue that what they're doing is manipulation, not adjusting. I understand there's a difference, but that's exactly the point. The question is, why are they moving that bone in the first place? The adjustment is not our product. It's how we deliver the product, not the actual product itself. According to Dr. Stephen, our real product is our philosophy. It's the above down, inside out philosophy, the understanding that health happens from above down, inside out, or ADIO as we call it. That resonated pretty deeply with me. It's the first thing I teach to my patients. I tell them, your body's designed to be healthy. It's meant to work well and it's meant to feel great. What interferes with that is stress. And the 3 main types of stress that we deal with are structural, chemical, and emotional. I also teach them that it's the fundamental difference between our approach and the standard Western medical approach. Their philosophy is that the body is somehow broken and requires some kind of outside intervention to fix it, typically a drug of some kind. Ours is that we need to identify and remove the interference to allow the body to heal itself. That can seem like a little thing, like semantics, when patients first hear it, partly because it's so foreign, right? They've never actually heard it before. But in reality, it's everything. The ADIO approach is fundamental to our chiropractic philosophy. Dr. Steve reminded me that we should always keep the main thing the main thing. What he meant by that was that every additional modality, therapy, or communication that we introduce into our practice must align completely with our philosophy. Otherwise, we're creating contradiction and confusion. And there's a saying in sales, confusion never converts. Everything that we add to our practice should be positioned as something that's supporting or enhancing the adjustment, as a means of removing interference from the nervous system and allowing ADIO healing to occur. Better Balance Orthotics align beautifully here. These orthotics will help you get the most out of your adjustment and hold your adjustment better. They're always positioned as an amplifier and enhancer of the adjustment, never a replacement for it. Dr. Steve believes this is the ideal way of communicating their value and importance to your patients. I've found the same thing to be true. When you take this approach, patients just get it. The same's true for everything you do in practice, whether it's shockwave, laser, massage, nutrition, pillows, dry needling, PEMF, whatever it might be. There's so many great therapies out there that complement what we do. But if they're presented as just collection of possible clinical options, then it can feel overwhelming or disjointed to the patient. And remember, confusion never converts. There is significant research to support this conclusion. Many studies have shown that too many choices leads to less sales. And remember, in chiropractic, a sale can be the difference between someone getting healthy or not. As Dr. Steve put it, if you can't tie something back to the adjustment in a single sentence, then it doesn't belong in your practice. By the way, this doesn't limit your use of supportive modalities. It just places them in the right context. Steve told me that he's a black belt at this, and he's right, he was. He gave me at least 10 examples to prove it. I'd suggest that it's highly worth your time doing an audit of the different offerings in your practice, including how they're communicated. And any that don't fit this framework need to be either repositioned or eliminated altogether. The amount of clarity, certainty, and conviction this creates, both in your team and in your patients, is truly palpable. It's like suddenly everyone's running in the same direction, towards the same goal. It really lifts the whole practice. So if our real product is our philosophy, with ADIO being a critical component of that, a new concept has recently been crystallizing in my mind. There's a perfect complement to above, down, inside out. It's like a mirror image, like a love-it-brother relationship in the spine, a functional, reciprocal relationship. I call it BUOI. I mentioned 2 weeks ago that many of the experts I've been talking to have come to the same conclusion, that when we get the top and the bottom of the system sorted, everything in between just seems to fall into place. This is a physical manifestation of that. Healing may flow from the top down, but biomechanics flows from the ground up. All forces in the body, whether internally generated or externally imposed, must ultimately be anchored into the ground. Otherwise, we simply fall over. We've discussed the mechanism of this at length, including the function of the myofascial meridians described in anatomy trains and the concept of tensegrity. You can check out links to those episodes below. This is the bottom-up component. Every time our foot strikes the ground, the forces generated must be absorbed, multiplied, and then returned to the ground for propulsion. But this doesn't happen in a vacuum. It requires precise tuning and coordination of muscles, fascia, bones, and joints, all acting together in a perfect symphony. And our brain requires sensory information to conduct that symphony. Lots of it. And if we want the right output, it has to be accurate. That's why our foot contains some of the greatest density of mechanoreceptors and proprioceptors in the body, and it houses the smallest, finest nerves in the peripheral nervous system. Our nervous system is a sensory-first system. Afferent must precede efferent. This is the outside-in component. It's a major reason why shoes and flat, featureless surfaces are so damaging. They massively reduce afferent input. And without that, efferent never has a chance of being correct. And there's solid research to back this up. It shows that when our foot strikes the ground reaction forces are absorbed into the body in less than 50 milliseconds. But it takes 70 milliseconds for the brain to activate our muscles. This means it's too slow. We can't operate reactively. The brain must anticipate the ground reaction forces and pre-activate neuromuscular responses to meet the ground with every step. And it can only do that with constant moment-to-moment accurate sensory input. Our brain then uses isometric contractions of the foot and leg muscles to create precise tension in the fascial compartments, dampening the impact forces. This is known as muscle tuning theory. It's this calculated, anticipatory control of muscles, joints, and fascia that allows us to absorb force, elastically multiply it, and then use it for efficient propulsion, rather than experience it as damaging impact forces throughout our body. I've heard Dr. Franson say that every problem in the body is the result of either a toxicity or a deficiency, or both. The shoes and flat surfaces issue falls into the category of both. The deficiency is the lack of accurate afferent input, and the toxicity is the aberrant foot mechanics and constant pounding of excessive, poorly managed ground reaction forces. Unfortunately, most people are experiencing this double whammy every day, including many of our patients from the moment they step off our treatment table. This is why it's so critical to incorporate the below-up, outside-in component into our treatments. Completes the loop. Here's the simple way to think about it. ADIO represents the intelligence, the expression. BUOI represents the environment, the information. Or even more simply, above, down, inside out is the brain telling the body what to do. Below, up, outside in is the body telling the brain what's happening. I remember years ago seeing Dr. John Demartini lecture for an entire day on the ancient wisdom, as above, so below. He described in intricate detail how it plays out on every level of the cosmos, from stars and galaxies right down to cells and human psychology. This is just another example of that universal principle in action. Next week, we'll explore an interesting biomechanical model that I recently came across that ties the foot-brain connection into a coherent sensory and mechanical system. It's the physical, functional link between what I'm describing today, above, down, inside out, and below, up, outside in. Before I go, one last thing. If you could just take a moment to subscribe or like or share any of my videos, it would really help the algorithm connect us with chiropractors who really need to learn these foundational concepts. I appreciate it. Thanks so much. All right, have an awesome week. See you next time.